Hi everyone. In a previous lesson, we focused on demand, how consumers make decisions. Today, we shift perspective. We now look at producers or firms. We ask, how do firms decide how much to produce and sell? This brings us to the concept of supply. Now, what is supply? Supply is about both willingness and ability. It refers to how much of a good or service firms are willing and able to produce at different prices. Just like demand, supply depends on incentives and constraints. But instead of consumers maximizing satisfaction, firms are typically trying to maximize profit. This leads us to the law of supply. The law of supply states that as all price increases, quantity supply increases, all else equal. This is the opposite relationship to demand. Firms respond positively to price because of profit incentives. Now, let's look at the supply curve. Each point on the curve shows how much firms are willing to supply at a given price. There are two key features. It slopes upwards. Now, the supply curve slopes upward for several key reasons. One, profit incentives. Higher prices increase potential profit. When firms can sell their good at higher prices, production becomes more attractive, so they increase output. Two, opportunity cost. As firms produce more of a good, they must divert resources from other uses. This increases opportunity cost. So higher prices are needed to justify producing more. Three, entry of firms. Higher prices attract new firms into the market. More firms mean greater total supply. Together, these factors explain why supply curves slope upwards. And also, it assumes ceteris paribus, all other factors are held constant. This assumption is crucial just like in the demand curve, because if the other price factors change, the curve will shift. Now, we must clearly distinguish between movement along the supply curve and shift of the supply curve. Movement along the supply curve occurs when price changes. For example, if price increases, firms move up the curve and supply more. Whereas for the shift of a supply curve, this occurs when non-price factors change. For example, changes in costs, technology, or regulation. This distinction is essential for accurate analysis. Now, supply behaves differently in the short run and the long run. In the short run, capacity is fixed. Firms cannot easily expand production. They may be limited by machinery, buildings, and labor contracts. So supply is relatively inelastic. In the long run, firms can adjust fully, invest in new capital, invest and expand production or enter or exit markets. So supply becomes more elastic. Now let's apply this to a real-world example, private schools. Private schools face several constraints: high fixed costs, limited physical capacity, regulation, and staffing constraints. Because of these factors, supply is relatively inelastic in the short run. If a tax increases costs, schools cannot quickly expand or adjust. They may struggle to absorb the cost. This means price changes may be passed on to consumers. For example, higher school fees. Now, understanding supply is not just theoretical, it has real world implications. It helps us predict whether prices rise or fall. If supply is limited, prices are more likely to increase. It also helps us predict how firms respond to taxes. Do firms absorb the cost or pass it on to consumers? Or maybe long-term investment decisions. Will firms expand capacity or exit the market? Supply behavior plays a key role in shaping economic outcomes. Now let's summarize. Supply shows producer behavior. The law of supply states that price and quantity supplied are positively related. Price changes because movements along the curve. Non-price factors cause shifts of the curve. And importantly, supply differs between the short run and the long run. The key takeaway is this: firms respond to incentives. Higher prices encourage the production, Higher costs discourage it. Understanding supply allows us to predict how producers react to changes in the market. In the next lesson, we will combine demand and supply to understand market equilibrium, how prices are actually determined. Thank you.